Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wemcast. I'm joined today, hailing from Salisbury in the UK, by Joe Bradshaw. How are you, Joe?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much for asking me. It's a real pleasure to be involved. So thank you very much, Will.
No worries, no worries. So Joe's a very experienced expedition leader, outdoor instructor and mountaineer. She's very close to completing the 7 summits. She works closely with young people supporting the Duke of Edinburgh scheme. And she teaches youngsters, in her words, that there's more life than an iPhone, more to life than an iPhone. She travels around the UK giving talks to groups and business on resilience and never giving up, and is proudly raising funds for the charity Place to Be that advocates for children's mental health. She's a proud dog parent to 2 Springer Spaniels, Daisy and Lily. Anything there I've missed, Joe?
No, I think that's it, actually. Yeah, although I'm currently a Tesco's delivery driver. So there you go.
Are you? So
Yes.
Doing your bit during the lockdown.
I am. Yes, yeah. There's no such thing as a selfless act. So I needed a job because all of my work is cancelled, and I live on my own, so I'm not bringing anything back home to anybody or taking anything out. So yeah, it's worked out well.
That's amazingly adaptable. How many deliveries are you doing a day at the moment?
Well, I've got. I work for I do 2 long shifts, so I do a 9 till 7 Monday and Saturday, and we do runs in the morning and the afternoon. And then on Wednesdays I do a 9 till. No, I don't. I do a 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then Thursdays I do a 2 till 11. So again, we're out for 2 blocks of time for that. So I was out yesterday and we did about 10 drops in the morning and about 15 in the afternoon. So yeah, it's certainly keeping me fit.
That's a hectic schedule.
Yeah, it is. And, going out to all the villages around Salisbury and, you're loading up the van 3 times a day with half a ton of food or more and then taking it all out again. So, over and above all the fizz I'm trying to do at home, it's certainly keeping me active, which is great.
Great. It sounds like loading carrier bags full of veg into old ladies' houses is not that different from loading duffel bags onto an aeroplane on a big adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of my trips with Discover Adventure and humping people's bags on and off trucks and in and out of hotels is actually
good preparation.
Instead for this, for sure. Yeah.
And I've had the pleasure of working on 2 commercial overseas treks with you, Joe. I think we've been up Kilimanjaro together and Everest Base Camp.
Yes, indeed we have, and they were both fantastic and challenging in their own particular rights as well. So yeah, it was great to have your experience there, but also to show you the mountains and what it's like being out there as well. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, the first trip, the Kilimanjaro trip, that was my first gig actually as an expedition medic, and you took me under your wing, so I've always been indebted to you.
Oh, my pleasure. You wouldn't have known that it was your first one, apart from the old sunglasses. Can I tell people about the sunglasses?
Tell me about the sunglasses, Joe. Remind me.
So the sunglasses. So on the kit list, it advises clients to have wraparound sunglasses of category 4, because the UV rays are much stronger up at altitude, and the wraparounds, really help any light getting in from the side. So bless you, turn up with sort of fashion Ray-Bans. I think they were they Ray-Bans? Yeah.
They were kind of Primark Ray-Bans, yeah.
It weren't even real Ray-Bans. Fantastic. So after the second day in the afternoon, we had a bit of a rest at camp, and I went and had a sleep, and I know Cambers, who we were working with, who was my assistant, had a bit of a sort of mountain wash and got himself looking sort of presentable again. And you actually refashioned your sunglasses with duct tape to put side pieces on, and they worked really well. You wouldn't even know that they weren't proper side pieces. So that's where the adaptability of our medics really impresses me. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, do you know what, Joe? I'm not really keen on people who have all the gear and no idea. I'd much rather have none of the gear and no idea. And
Yeah,
I'm glad that everyone could
and that
see that
was
I created a unique piece of eyewear that was,
yes,
yeah, a
yeah,
world first on
absolutely,
any mountain.
and you, yeah, absolutely, and you came to Nepal with, I think, category 3 wraparounds. So we'd moved on a stage, and I lent you my spare pair of category 4 wraparounds, and you commented on how much of a difference that the extra category for the UV rays makes. So I think I think learning by doing is really important, and taking on board that. So yeah. You did a good job, Doc.
Absolutely. I've every day of every trip I've done, I've been schooled in something new. And on that occasion, it's just the
School,
sheer
yeah.
amount of light at altitude. It just completely
Oh,
fries your eyes, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wear my sunglasses, my category 4 wraparound, even when it's cloudy, to the point, when the rain comes, then obviously they come off. And I advise clients to do as well, because I remember on one Kilimanjaro trip, it was snowy up the top. I think it was snowy with ours as well, but snowy at the top. And I had to stop on the way down and help a client who was in need of some medical attention. And I took my sunglasses off, and it was sunny and glary, and I had snow blindness, not to the bit where you can't see anything, but the pain was unbelievable. So, and that was 10 minutes without sunglasses in that environment. So it's so, and I think because I can now use that example for clients to say, I've done it. Please don't, because I can tell you it's super bad for you and really painful. So, yeah, my doctor at the time, she was quite straightforward. No, she said, you whinge a lot when you're not well. I was like, thanks. It's very painful. So yeah, and
Yeah,
not good for you as well. So.
I've done a lot of surf trips in tropical places where the sun is very bright. You can't really wear sunglasses in those places, so I felt like I'd kind of adapted to the intense light, but that's clearly not the case. Your eyes just don't suddenly develop a protective film over them. So I definitely advise anyone going up into high places, alpine, snow environments, that the amount of light is so powerful. You've got to have the right kit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely
for
learn the
sure.
hard way or the easy
For
way. It's up
sure.
to you. Yeah.
You do. Every day's a school day. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I remember that Kili summit, that particular summit was quite a long one. I think it was 16 hours from the point that we left the final camp about 11 o'clock at night to the point that we got all the group back to camp that evening. It was a monster.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because when I first did it in 2008, and I'd never really done, I was assistant on that trip, and I hadn't really done anything of that length of day, and particularly not walking overnight. And it's hard. And I've done 35 summit. Well, I've done 33 summits, but 35 expeditions, and it's still hard because you know what's ahead of you, and there's a long time at night, and it's going to be a long day. And I've actually had a 23.5 hour day once when I had a client who pulled a muscle in his back. He happened to be the tallest, biggest person I've ever taken up the mountain, muscularly, not fat, but it was a long day, and you just get through it because it will end at some point. And I think for me, building up those years of experience has, I got the confidence to say to clients, and hopefully they believe me, is it will finish. You are going to get to bed at some point. And when we get back to Barafu after the summit rotation, and then you get an hour's rest or something, and then you have to go down, and I get to people saying, I can't walk and I can't go any further. It's like, yes, you can. You need to get up, and trust me, the walk will do you good, and then you will sleep much better lower down. So, but it's a monster.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Wow. So, does it get any easier after 35 Kili summits?
I think yes, it does. Yes, in a way, because I know what is coming up, and I know how people are going to react, and people react at various different stages, because we're not all built the same, as you clearly know. And I know some people aren't going to listen to the advice, and some people listen to it absolutely, but still everybody can get altitude sickness at some point. And it's explaining to people that it's not a disease or a thing or an illness, it's a range of symptoms. And because people say, have you ever had altitude sickness? I'm like, yeah, of course I have. I've had headaches. I've been sick a few times. I've had nausea. I've had the lethargy. I've had the dizziness. I've had all of that in varying stages. And one time on my second ascent, I had to be turned around by the doctor, which was an absolute killer, because I got quite serious altitude sickness, and I got up to about 5,500 meters, and I was the walking dead, and she turned me around and sent me down. And I'm human,
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interests me, and we've talked about this before, but the clients always ask us, don't they? They're kind of, what happens if you get sick? As the leader or the doc, who's gonna take care of us? And you just have to say, well, hey, look, we're not immortal. We're human, just like you are, and that could happen.
Yeah, it does, and that's, for me, is instilling the trust in my local team as well is so important. I am not the only one in charge there, so when I'm guiding with any company now, it's so important that I have trust in my local team, and I've worked with many of them for many years, and that I have a good relationship with them, and the clients see that, and I involve everybody. And I say from the start, we are one team. There's not me at the head and then everyone else. We are all on a level. We're all co-pilots, because, for example, last October, I got tonsillitis on the first day. I started getting a very bad throat infection, and then it sort of got worse and worse. And I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. And I had to stay at Barafu, which is the sort of base camp. And my local team, took my group up in some pretty tricky weather conditions and brought them all back down safely. And I knew that my clients would be safe, and I knew my team would be safe. And actually, that I am there as sort of backup and encouragement on summit night. I'm not the one that's going to get them to the top. They're the ones that will. So, and that's having trust in your team and instilling the trust in your clients as well. It's so important. I've seen it so many times where the UK or the Western leader is the be all and end all, and you can't be. You absolutely can't be. So
that's really, really interesting,
and
Jo.
doctors get sick too.
Yeah, so you really flatten the hierarchy, and you're empowering other people to be able to step in when perhaps anticipating that there are going to be times when you're not going to be able to make decisions and lead the team, but you know that you've got the right people around you and that they're able to do that, and they've got permission to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not just if I get ill, but if I don't have a doctor on my expeditions and I'm the trip medic, then I'm the one at the back. And then if I have to deal with any medical issues and the team go ahead, I don't want my clients thinking, oh my God, Joe's not here, we're not going to make it. You can't instill that type of hierarchy or philosophy on an expedition. It's crazy. And I get very frustrated when I see that in other groups, because you're actually failing your clients at that point. You need to be able to educate them and give them enough confidence that they are doing this not by themselves, but as a team, and that they're pulling everybody else's experience and trust together. And I'm the one that helps make that gel, but I'm definitely not the glue for it. Everybody does it, everybody does it. So
that shows real humility and self-awareness. So you're normally spending many months of the year on the road, overseas, in various airport terminals, but currently you're in lockdown.
Yes.
How is that? How is it for you adjusting to this change of pace?
good and bad. I was actually, so where were we? 7th of April today, and I am supposed to be in Nepal with a group with 360 Expeditions. And we were supposed to be trekking to Everest Base Camp and then climbing Island Peak. And 360 were also, they had a Everest group out, so they're supposed to be on the north side. You know, they probably would have got to base camp in the next week or so. And obviously everyone else's expeditions have been cancelled, but I know the mountains will be there. For me, losing the work has been a huge kick, but I have the ability to go and get another job, which I have. My concerns are with our local crew, and I know they're being looked after, so that's good. And my clients as well. You know, I've had expeditions cancelled on me, and we'll talk a bit about the earthquake and when things suddenly stop. So it's trying to look on the bright side in this really dark time. You know, I live on my own. I can go to work. I'm not bringing the virus back to anybody else here. We're trying to practice social distancing in a very busy supermarket. So it's hard. And I'm doing what I can to, you know, I have my down days like everybody does. And I sort of allow myself to have that, because I think it's a natural process. I think if you're constantly up and happy and, you know, everything is 100% positive, there's something not quite, you're shielding something. So
Yeah,
it's just being honest with yourself, you know. And
absolutely.
actually,
And
I was talking to a good friend of, no, go on.
I was just going to say, I just think that's great to show some self-compassion, some kindness to yourself, and allow yourself to feel those emotions, because we are all only human, and anyone that pretends that they're flying 100 miles an hour and loving life every minute of every day is definitely lying to everyone else and themselves, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I had a chat with a very good adventure friend of mine last night, and I said, how are you dealing with it? And obviously for both of us, the money, because we're self-employed, it's hard, but he said, I'm actually really loving being in one place for longer than a couple of days. And I get that. You know, when I'm in between expeditions, I come home, I have my dogs, but I'm usually exhausted and either recovering from an expedition and then getting ready for another one. So I don't ever really, I've got so many projects on the go at home that are just started, half finished, haven't really done them as best I want to, but now I have the time to do them. I painted my bathroom the other day. I've lived in my house for 4.5 years. Why it took an afternoon. It's not difficult, but it's having the energy and the want to do it. You know, so yeah, the thing I'm finding hardest is not having my dogs here. They're with my mum to keep her company, and it means that I can work at Tesco, but it's, you know, short-term pain.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole kind of expedition adventure industry is effectively unable to operate at the moment. And this is off the back of Brexit, when a lot of UK-based companies were facing a reduced power of the pound. And, you know, so there's huge challenges to the livelihoods of all the people that work in this industry. Do you think things are, you know, how long is it going to take for things to recover? And if they do, will we really be able to get back to how things were?
Gosh, it's a kind of crystal ball question that I'm not really sure, because I've just had some work. I was supposed to be doing an expedition in Ethiopia at the end of this year, and we had a few people booked onto the trip, but we've had to cancel it because we are highly unlikely to get enough people now to make the trip run. And who knows how long this will be going on for. You know, I've got 2 kiddie trips in September, and Africa seems to be a stage behind us. So, but the expedition companies are having issues about, you know, we can't cancel trips, but we're having to sort of sit and wait and see how things go. And it's really hard, you know. And this, as a freelancer, it's, it was like the tap was turned off. That was it. My last DV expedition was cancelled a couple of Wednesdays ago, just before lockdown. And who knows when they're going to come back? I don't know. And that's the thing. So I'm settling into my new normal for now. And I've just, I've got to accept that this is how it's going to be for however many months.
It's for you, it sounds like it's been about acceptance.
Oh, 100%. There's no point. I can't get angry about it because everybody is in the same position as me. It's not just happening to me. I could have chosen not to work, but then how do I pay my bills? I'm just coming into the busy season for me. The next from sort of the middle of March through to the end of November are really busy for me, whereas the first part of the year has been quite quiet because that's just how my years work out. So I'm on the back foot financially anyway, and it's like, well, what do? I don't want to get into debt because of this, and I can work and because I have the skills to do it. I can drive vans and I can pick heavy stuff up, and that's all good. So why? And I'm fortunate I'm in the position to do it. So, I'm glad I can be of some use. But yeah, I think flexibility in situations like this is so important, and not blaming the government for everything. They are dealing with something immense at the moment, and there are so many people trying to get online and do all the claims. And if I can just be one less person doing that to help somebody who can or who can't get out and work, then I'm happy with that. I'd rather try and be as self-sufficient as possible. But who knows?
Yeah. Okay, Joe. Well, let's talk a little bit about you and your, let's wind back the clock and talk about your earlier adult life. And in your words, in your early adult life, you were a no-saying, height-hating, comfort-loving business advisor. And there was this moment where you discovered this true passion for the outdoors. Tell me how that happened.
I'll take you a little bit back to when I left school. I was horse mad and thought I would spend my life working with horses. I thought I'd get married to a farmer and have lots of children and live, the sort of proper rural life. And I worked with horses for a few years until my mid-20s, and then it came to an end because I'd found a couple of really bad employers, and they sort of squashed my dream. And then my farrier boyfriend cheated on me. So everything that I thought my life was going to be then suddenly stopped. So I went and found a job in a department store and met one of my managers, who's now one of my best friends. Really took me under her wing and gave me the confidence to start trying to live, like we were saying earlier, another new normal. So I worked my way through there, but really lost my confidence in life and my confidence in myself because, life's not supposed to be like this. This wasn't in the script, but it clearly was going to be part of my story. And what I found now is that with every job I've had, it's given me skills to not only go on to the next thing, but also to support others who are going through that as well. And then I was bored at work one day, and I was a management accountant for a firm of who sold semiconductors, actually microchips, and I was very bored at work one day, and I was on the internet, and then this advert for a parachute jump came up for ASMA UK. And I thought, yeah, I'll do that. I was in my early 30s. I can conquer my fear of heights. It's absolute rubbish. So I signed up to do it and raised some money throughout the office. So I raised about £400. I think everyone was a bit shocked that I was going to go and do something. And to then cut a long story short, it wasn't that I suddenly found adventure, because after that I went on a bike ride with Discover Adventure. because I for Asthma UK in Peru, and it was like somebody had planted a seed, and each adventure was watering it a little bit more, so it was growing a little bit more. But at no stage did I ever think that I would do anything around the world. I thought I would, because I was a business advisor then at the time, and when Discover Adventure asked me to join the team of leaders or the crew, I never then thought I'd be working for them, either in the office or as a leader. And then when the next stage happened and I did move down to Salisbury and worked in the office, I never thought I'd go freelance. So I never had a view of what was coming next. I was really living in the now, and kind of have been ever since.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
So that's amazing. So just saying yes to that first opportunity, the skydive, and then there was the Discover Adventure stuff. Each that led on to other opportunities, and it started to change you as a person inside as well.
Yeah, hugely. I was not a confident individual for a lot of my life, but it was my job as a business advisor for Business Link. So when I started there in 2003, I would never have got up and done a seminar or done a briefing to clients or all of this stuff. But 3 weeks into the job, they said, "Oh, you have to stand up and do an elevator pitch and tell people what Business Link were doing." And I was like, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm too scared." But my manager gave me the skills to do it and gave me the confidence to say, "Look, everybody is in your position. Nobody wants to do it, but it's what we do." So it was a sort of gradual building of this confidence that has really helped in what I'm doing now. And yeah, and I think when I do talks to businesses or schools, I talk about champions in my life. So not people who stand up there going, "Well, hey, I'm the greatest," but somebody who's got your back. So somebody who says to you, "You can do this. We have confidence in you. Just get on and do it." Gives you a bit of a gentle or not so gentle kick up the bum, really. And I've had a few really, really supportive people in my life who have done just that. So they see potential when you don't, and that's so important.
Yeah, so that's really important. Talking about the role of whatever you want to call them, champions or mentors, or the significant other that is able to really kind of guide you in the right direction. And it's been totally transformative for you, hasn't it? That you're now, your entire career, your whole livelihood is essentially climbing mountains.
Yes, I know. Who'd have thought? It's nuts.
Who'd have thought? Yeah.
Yeah. I do think, I say this often to people who say to me, "Oh, it's all right for you. You've got this amazing life," and he said, and I said, "Well, I've built it to be like this. There's been many years and a lot of hard work. It doesn't happen overnight, and I'm going to hang on to that. But I am very aware that in my head somebody is going to tap me on the shoulder and go, 'Back in your box, love. That's the feeling I have, that I'm living this sort of just dual life, because I know what I used to be like. I know that I was such a insecure and not and a sort of crushingly unconfident, not confident, whatever the word is, just shy person, and I'm now achieving stuff.
You still feel a bit of imposter syndrome?
Oh, huge. Yeah, very much so. When I was in Antarctica, like you do, over the last couple of weeks of last year, 2019, and I was climbing Vincent, which is the highest mountain on Antarctica, as part of the 7 summits, and I was sat in the mess tent with the most amazing mountaineers in the world. There was Lakpa Rita Sherpa, who's climbed Everest, highly in the teens. There's a guy called Wes who is has climbed Denali, is guided on Denali 40 times, has done all these new routes. There's Robert Anderson, who has done the Seven Summits multiple times, mostly by new routes or solo or both. There was Anders, who's again is the most incredible mountaineer, and and Rolf, who is a good friend of mine, whose CV is insane, and I was sat there thinking, oh my god, I was so. But then when I'm sat with clients and they see what I've done, they say, oh, I could never do what you do, and I was like, I get that, but you could, and it's just it takes time and a lot of hard work to do it, and it depends what your thing is. Nobody's climbed exactly the same mountains that I have in exactly the same timeline, and I haven't for other people, so I can't really compare myself or my journey with anyone else, and vice versa. It's we've all got different ones, so
everyone's story is their own. Yeah. So you mentioned the Seven Summits campaign. I mean, for those people that haven't come across it, it's climbing each of the highest mountain peaks on each of the 7 continents. And you've completed peak 6. You've got Carten's Pyramid still to come, I understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the 6 so far has been the most challenging, do you think?
I think that's a tough one. I think actually Carsten's has been the most challenging because I've had 3 expeditions cancelled.
Yeah, so the one you haven't done yet is the one
that's
I
haven't done yet. Oh.
Yeah.
So Carsten's, which is there,
but
you can see that. Yeah.
But the logistics for that sounds mad. Just to get to base camp is a major undertaking.
Yeah. So in the beginning of 2018, I was supposed to be going in the January, and I was a sponsor found me for Everest and Denali, and after Everest in 2016, that's when the 7 became a thing for me. I'd already done 4, and unfortunately, my sponsor had to pull out in beginning of 2018. So just before I was about to pay the money and go, that was it, game over. So I was then. Unfortunately, my father had died at the end of the year before. So I spent 2018 just trying to deal with grief and all of the stuff that is surrounded by that. And then the beginning of 2019, I thought, right, okay, I can do this. I can raise the money myself somehow and get there. And so I was supposed to be going the end of September last year, in 2019, and 24 hours before we were due to fly, the expedition was cancelled because of separatist behaviour or civil unrest in West Papua, and the mountain was shut. So okay, so we'll bring it over to March 2020, and before COVID-19 started to get serious, we then had to cancel the expedition again because the civil unrest had kicked off again. So when we'll get there, I don't know. And I say we, there's a myself and a team of friends who are going. So maybe towards the end of this year, seeing how it goes. Fortunately, it's all paid for. I just need to get flights now. So the agent has kept the money, and we will go at some point. But number 7 is tough.
All people see is the summit photos and your blog and everything, and you do these amazing audio recordings from the summits, keeping everyone up to date. But they don't see all the training, hard work, logistics, the planning all goes into this. These summits.
Yeah, hugely. And Carsten's is bonkers because it's a 1-day rock climb, and that's all it is. But like you were saying, the logistics to get there are pretty phenomenal. And with Denali, I was dragging Dave the tyre around the New Forest, and up in North Wales or around the Brecon Beacons, anywhere that I was working, I took my 23 kilo tyre with me, and I had 20 kilos on my back, and because I knew that I didn't want to be the weak link of the team, because on Denali you're in rope teams and we're only as strong as each other. So I did a ton of training with a local trainer who I've been going to for 5 years now, and the same with Everest. The training is phenomenal when you when you sort of, you've got this big objective, and that you know that you are in charge of how fit you're going to be. It's nobody else that's in charge of that apart from you. So, when I get onto expeditions and clients say to me, I haven't been able to train as much as I had wanted, but you'll get me there. It's like, actually, no. This is your own legs will get you there. And I can give you all the motivation in the world, but it's your legs and actually what's up here that count. So, I'm not taking that mantle. Yeah.
It's so nice to hear people when they take ownership of their own physical fitness and their aptitude to enter these dangerous environments. I mean, I know you can relate to this, but the number of clients I've had on trips who've disclosed that they've done absolutely zero training, they've literally gone from couch to Kilimanjaro, whatever it is, and you just think, they've taken no ownership whatsoever. They just expect to be kind of carried along, and it's just no good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the initial red nose climb in 2008, I think it was, 2009, did the world good and not so good, because a lot of people, Chris Moyles was not the fittest client. He was a heavy smoker, and everything. But so people say, well, if Chris Moyles can do it, I can do it. I was like, did you see how much he trained? Did you see that he quit smoking? Did you see that he listened to everything that Raj Joshi said? Did you see that he didn't bring his ego onto the mountain? Did you see all of that? And they were like, no. I was like, that's what it takes to get yourself up the mountain. Not that, I haven't done any training, so I'm handing you that little mantle.
Damn these celebrities. So on the 25th of April in 2015, Joe, a massive earthquake hit Nepal, killed 9,000 people and injured 22,000. And you had some really intense first-hand experience of this. Tell me where you were at the time.
So I was at Camp 1 on Everest. It's just giving me goosebumps. I was at Camp 1 on Everest. It was our first rotation above the Khumbu Icefall on an attempt to climb Everest. And we had arrived at Camp 1 probably half an hour before. And I say we, it was Rolf Ustra and myself. We were climbing together, and then we were with, we had sort of base camp cooperative, so we were with some other climbers. And all of our tents were set up, and we initially just chucked our rucksacks in a tent, and when we got in it, we found it had a big dip in it. So, and you don't want to spend a couple of nights in sort of sleeping like a banana. So we were going to move to the tent next door, and I was in the tent just handing out the kit to Rolf when I can't even remember why we suddenly stopped, but we just stopped and looked at each other, and this rumbling was coming from all around. And Camp 1 is situated in the Western Coombe, and you've got the west shoulder of Everest to one side, and you've got Nuptse to the other, and steep sides and big hanging glaciers. So it avalanches quite a lot and comes across Camp 1. So it's not the greatest place to be in the world. But as a mountaineer, when something releases, you can hear where it is, and you have a bit of an idea about the size and whether you need to get out of dodge pretty quickly. But this was different because this was rumbling from 360. It was coming from all around, which is really odd. So we just stopped and looked at each other as if to go, this doesn't sound right or feel right. And then I was kneeling in the tent, and Rolf was just crouching in the porch, and suddenly the glacier beneath us just dropped, just sort of felt like it was going to disappear. And because we had a dip in the tent, I thought that a crevasse was going to open up, and I thought that was it. We were going down, and being wrapped up in a tent for my last seconds of my life with Rolf is not how I want to go. So, and then the ground started shaking. So we both dashed out of the tent because if anything was going to come on us, we didn't want to be inside. We dashed out of the tent and the ground was, properly shaking. It was almost shaking us off our feet. And we felt the wind rush, which you get before you actually get hit by snow or whatever from an avalanche. And we felt that all around. And then we were avalanche, but not anything as bad as what was going on down at base camp, which was pretty much being obliterated. And it, I don't know how long it lasted for. People say 30 seconds, but it felt like forever. And then it suddenly stops. And we were just, Christ, what on earth? We just thought the glacier was having a big shift because we didn't know that it was an earthquake. And then Henry, our base camp manager, got on the radio to Rob and another climber in our group and said, "Are you guys okay?" And we were like, "What on earth just happened?" And he said, "Base camp's been destroyed." And you can't compute that because when we left at 4 a.m. that morning, and I was handed a cup of coffee by one of our Sherpas, and we sort of packed up our tent and we were like, "See you in a couple of days." And you can't then compute that those guys are then not there because 3 of our Sherpas were sadly killed and everything was destroyed. It's just, your brain just doesn't want to accept it, I don't think, because I'd never been in a situation like that. I've been in some fairly hairy weather situations. I've been in a hurricane before, and or a typhoon rather, and some pretty interesting weather conditions, but nothing as bad as this. So and then we were just stuck there. We couldn't go down through the icefall because it was so badly damaged, and we didn't know when another aftershock or another earthquake was going to happen. So we were rescued 2 days later on the Monday by helicopter.
Yeah, I mean that's the Camp 1. That is the upper limit of the altitude that a helicopter can even reach, isn't it? I mean, that's in itself, that flight in itself is quite a risky undertaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And helicopters can get up to Camp 4, which is at 6,400 meters. They could pick up a person there and nothing else. And when we were picked up from Camp 1, which was just above 6,000 meters, and you get into the helicopter, and it was basically 2 people, your rucksack, so we had expedition packs, and maybe a tent, because all of our tents were destroyed, so we took a tent down. And there was nothing in the back of the helicopter. The only thing, the pilot had his seat, and he was on oxygen, and you were just thrown in, bundled into it, and it took us 7 hours to climb up, and it took us 2.5 minutes to get down. And when we were going back over the icefall, you just saw, that the ladders had been destroyed or distorted, and the route was not there anymore, and how no one was killed in the icefall. I think just because of the time of day it was, and the fact that the majority of people were out of the really gnarly bit of the Khumbu icefall. Timing is everything, and I'm a great believer in sliding doors. And had it been earlier, it would have been a whole different.
Wow. I mean, of all the places
scenario,
you could have been when an earthquake hit, but Camp 1 on Everest,
it's
just
not
ideal.
Mad, and it not ideal at all. And when we got back to base camp, we were told that base camp had been destroyed. So in your head, the whole 2 kilometers of Everest base camp is gone. And when we were flying back down, Rolf and I were like, this is a bit odd, because the lower third was still tented, and it still looked like a normal sort of base camp village and how it looks in the climbing season. And we landed, and we were sort of pulled out of the helicopter by one of the American guides from another team. And I said to him, "Where are we?" And not as in location, but where are we on the icefall? And he said, "Oh, you're right at the very lowest section of the camp, but brace yourself when you go up to yours." So we started walking up to what was our camp, and we were our camp was in the middle of the middle section, middle third that was destroyed. The upper section was fine and the lower section, but ours was totally destroyed. And it was as if we were on a film set and somebody any minute was going to come around the corner and go, cut, yeah, all good, sort of reset and everything. But it was real life. It was not a movie. And we got up to our camp, and because it was 2 days after the earthquake had struck, our Sherpas who had been at base camp and who weren't injured and hadn't been evacuated had set up a sort of temporary cook tent, and we'd already taken a tent down with us, and we just started digging for kit, and trying to tidy up. But
that's just awful loss of life at base camp, wasn't there? It was a really, really awful season.
19 people lost their lives from Sherpas to Western climbers, and to compound that, the year before, 16 climbing Sherpas had been killed in the avalanche, the hideous avalanche that happened in the icefall at the start of that season. So it was, I think everybody was just in pure shock, to be fair. Awful.
So I think the main thing from that was the impact it had on base camp, on operations in Everest, and also on the country as a whole. Kathmandu was pretty flattened. All of those religious monuments were damaged, and it was a huge event. But let's talk about the impact that had on your ambitions and to summit Everest. That was clearly, it was over for you that year, but fortunately you got another chance the following year, 2016, to summit Everest, and you had a second crack at the whip. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so Rolf and I were digging for our kit for a couple of days at base camp in 2015. And I just wanted to find my mobile phone. I had it in my head that I just needed to find that so I could be in contact with my mum. And I'd already spoken to her via someone else's phone. And I know Marnie, Rolf's wife, who runs 360 Expeditions, had already spoken to my mum as soon as the earthquake happened, and she knew that we were okay because Rolf had phoned her on the sat phone. And but that contact, no matter what your age is, it's being in contact with mum, and I knew for their sanity that it was important. And we were digging for kit, and you kind of had an understanding of the trajectory of where everything had gone. Whether you could find it or not was a different matter. So, and I was just digging, and Rolf was like, come on, we've got to stop now. We can't, there's nothing more we can do. Anyway, just before we were due to stop on the Tuesday afternoon, I dug up my mobile phone. It was under a metre of snow and ice, about 100 or so metres from our original camp, so being buried. Nothing else that was in the dry bag. All my electrical kit was in a particular dry bag. Nothing else was there. So why this survived? And it was, I had an iPhone 6 or something, and it was in a Mophie power bank case, and I think that's what saved it, is the solidity of that piece of equipment. And it was a sunny day, so I stuck it on a rock and let it warm up, and I turned it on, and then all of these messages started coming through. So I messaged my mum first and said, found my phone, I'm in contact. And she was like, that's brilliant. And then a message came through from my sponsor, whose parting comments in August before, when I'd last seen him, we've spoken since, but I last saw him the August before, was come back alive. So I think he may have been feeling a little bit, off about that comment. And we had, I went back to my tent and I put the phone on a boot to get some better signal. And we were having a bit of a conversation on text message, and he said, would you go back? And without an instant, I said, yes, absolutely. Because it wasn't anything that we had done wrong or I'd done wrong to stop the climb. I hadn't been a numpty. It's not that I wasn't fit enough or I got sick or anything. It's just Mother Nature had the ultimate bad day. And he said, fine, go. I will, put up the funds for you to go back in 2016. And I just couldn't believe it. I never thought I'd get the opportunity to climb once through sponsorship of that nature,
Wow.
let alone twice.
When you
So,
did
yeah,
reach the summit on 2016, how did it feel?
It was kind of bittersweet. I mean, it was incredible. We had the weather, excuse me, the weather was freezing cold. It was very windy, but it was very clear. So we had the most incredible views, but it was also quite busy. So one of the first questions that people ask me when they hear I've climbed Everest is, did you queue? These days, it's not, that's amazing. Wow, what was
What are
it
queues
like? It was, did you queue?
Yeah,
It was
it's
like,
the
oh,
reality of
God.
the world we live in,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah.
And the sort of, news reporting, which was another reason I never wanted to climb Everest. I didn't want to be part of that journalistic circus. Anyway, I was, and yes, we did queue. We'd had bad weather. There'd been bad weather high up on the mountain 24 hours before we started our climb. So the people that were due to go the 17th, 18th of May, then had to hunker down at the South Col, and we all 180 of us went up. It was busy. And I think the main issue, it's not the number of climbers, but it's the inexperience of some of them, and the lack of experience to know what to do when things don't quite go according to plan. And Everest is not the time to learn that stuff at all. So that was the main issue. It was a slow climb. I had music in one ear that kept me going. It's not, it's not a difficult climb. It's not technically that difficult. There are some interesting sections. It's hard and it's long. So when we got to the top, also we knew that we were going to go and climb Lhotse, which is the mountain next door. So I knew as a mountaineer anyway that I had to keep it together just to get down from the summit of Everest, but also that to conserve some energy to go and climb Lhotse, which would have been a few hours later. And you couldn't have stayed up the top for long because there were more people coming up, and it's actually not that big. I mean, it's a fairly big summit, but really not huge. But also we knew, because we were sort of probably 30 from the front or so, but we knew that we were then going to go past all the other climbers trying to come up, which on a skinny ridgeline is quite hairy.
Yeah, I bet.
So
it's a knife edge.
So it was a great, yeah,
Mm.
it was,
Yeah.
and for someone who hates heights, I've managed to, I manage it these days. I have various coping mechanisms of depending on what the situation is, and I'm obviously more confident now because I have more experience and more skills. But I'm still not a massive fan of airy ridgelines. The part of my brain is, my negative Nelly is going, what happens if you fall? That's a long way down, or don't trip up, and all these negative stuff. And then positive Polly, and I use these two characters in my teaching, is going, it's fine. Just concentrate on the next step. You're clipped in, you've got Sherpa support behind you, you want to do this, you're safe, and that's really important. So yeah, it's an interesting climb.
Yeah.
So.
And Joe, we're really looking forward to having you at the annual World Extreme Medicine Conference this autumn. You're going to do a session for us.
Can't wait.
On your experience as a leader working with a range of different medics. You've seen examples of really good and bad expedition medicine. Can you give us a sneak preview on a couple of things, examples of perhaps bad expedition medics that you've come across in your career so far?
Yeah, so I think one in particular.
Naming no names.
No, never naming any names. Yeah. Oh, who can I bring out? No, I think I had an interesting expedition I'm not even going to say where. And I'd already, I had two doctors on the trip, and my other leader my co-pilot was out in country already. And I met these two doctors at Heathrow, and I'd never met either of them before. One was a very experienced with the company I was working for, and the other one had only done a few trips and no overseas with us. He'd done an overseas trip with another company, and so I said hello to the first one because we just happened to meet up first, and it was like, oh, it's so cool to meet you, because I'd heard a lot about him, and and then when I met the next one, his opening sort of greeting wasn't, hi, how are you? He said, I'm an altitude junkie. I was like, wow, that's interesting place to start. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. So what have you done? He said, I've climbed Kilimanjaro, and that was it. So I was a little bit perplexed as to where this sort of large sort of statement had come from. And it almost puts you on a little bit of a back foot and a bit of an edge, because I'm not, I don't like ego or this sort of arrogance of I'm the greatest and I'm the most important. Like we were saying earlier, everybody plays their part on an expedition. I'm not the most important person in the trip. Doctors are, in my eyes, way more important than me, but we all do a job together. And this particular individual was maybe exceeding that role, I think. And then out of that came all sorts of other things that he was going to brief the clients about their sexual conduct on the trip. So it was an interesting dynamic, and I think a lot of it came out of nerves and anxiety from this particular individual that he just didn't really know how to deal with. So it came out. Anxiety comes out in many different ways, doesn't it? Insecurities, and it came out in a bit of a negative form. So we tried to sort of coach him through that. It was difficult at times, but
yeah. And one thing I've often found is or other leaders have fed back to me about medics that they've worked with, is there are some medics who don't interact very helpfully with the clients, perhaps don't appreciate what it's like to be a client and to be entering into a challenge like this, and perhaps don't show the level of compassion. Perhaps can you think of any examples of medics you've worked with perhaps were slightly out of touch with what they needed to be doing?
Yeah, I think a variety of different ones, just from the lack of empathy, and particularly if somebody, when you came and did Killy with me, it was your first time on the mountain. You were very aware that you could get sick as well as the clients, but you were in a position where you had more knowledge than them initially about what could go right and also what could go wrong. So you were sort of, you took on the information of yours, that you gave yourself, and you used that. And I've worked with a few other medics where they've felt that they are invincible, and as much as I can say, no, you're not, and they're like, but I know my stuff and I know I'm not going to get sick. I'm like, you are an individual and a human being. Everybody can get sick if they don't respect altitude, and they don't, and I think because they're struggling to keep themselves together, their levels of empathy with the clients are diminished. And sometimes I've had to take over a situation where, just through anxiety or whatever else, the doctor, the medic on the trip has maybe not dealt with a client as empathetically as we would have liked, because everybody is in a state of anxiety. So you've got this sort of underlying level of people are very short fused, can be very short fused. So I prefer medics that are very straight, like you were, and a lot of others I've dealt with. They're very straightforward. They will tell me how they feel. So I'm aware of how they are as much as the other way, and they're very honest, and I think that's so important.
It's interesting that whole kind of demeanor, that professional demeanor that we cultivate as medics in our usual clinics or wards, we are trying to project authority. We're trying to project the professional boundaries that we've got this. We want people to trust us, and I think when you translate that role into an expedition, there's a new level of vulnerability that is attached to that, and I think it's so fascinating to see how different people manage that, and it's interesting to hear your reflections on how that vulnerability, that the anxiety that generates, can manifest sometimes in some very unhelpful ways. And I think it's so powerful to be open with yourself and the members of the team, about that, and hopefully that can open the channel of communication. It can enable you to take proper care of yourself so that you're in a position of strength going into this, and you can handle the demands of the expedition, but also that you're not just trying to be some kind of superhero, and you're not just trying to show face, not show face all the time. And
yeah, and I think that's so important. Humility and vulnerability are two of the most important prerequisites, I think, for a leader and a medic on expeditions. And it's not letting people in to the depths of your personality, but it's showing that you are human and that you feel things. And because people say, they're like, oh, you must be really hard and this, that, and the other. I said, no, I don't. If I don't drink enough water, I'm still going to get a headache. And I know how to put it right, and I know what I've done wrong, but I'm still going to get a headache. If I push myself too hard or I don't eat enough, I know I'm going to feel sick because my body needs a sort of nice steady supply of food in whatever levels. So I'm not a superhuman. I still feel like that. And I think sometimes the most trickiest moments is when I have medics on trips who are clients. And if I'm working on my own and I don't have a medic with me, then obviously I'm as much of a medic as I'm trained. And I had a situation a few years ago where I was working on my own, and I had a couple of doctors on the trip who had never been to altitude. They'd never studied it. So that I was in a more advanced position of knowledge than they were. And they were questioning me, not through wanting to know what was going on, but they said to me, but you're not medically trained and we know more than you. And I was like, okay. And I was dealing with quite a tricky medical situation at the time that I had totally under control. I knew exactly what I was doing. And we evacuated the client, and she got down the mountain, was much better and safe and well. And it all happened very quickly without any sort of pre-warning. So when you're in that situation, you don't need somebody undermining you saying, you sure you know what you're doing? When they can clearly see. It's just, I think from their insecurity, they felt that they needed to be involved, which is fine. I think if they come up to me and said, do you need any help? Let us know if there's... And so I think there's ways of doing stuff that is really important. And I am more than happy to use people's skills where they're needed, So yeah,
it's really interesting you say that, Joe. I think as medics, many of us are natural fixers.
Yes.
We want to just dive in and be like, right, what do we need to do here?
Yeah.
But sometimes where there's a clear kind of leadership structure in that team, particularly if you're a medic that isn't the designated medic for that group, I think we've got to be really careful how we deploy our skills, and that's done through the right channels, and to complement what you're already doing in the local leadership, the local porters and guides. You can't just wade in and try and assume command and tell everyone what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had it on a recent Killy trip where I was working on my own, and we were passing another group who had a doctor with them, and I was already dealing with one of my crew who was experiencing sort of cold-like symptoms, and it wasn't... I know we put everything down to altitude until we prove it otherwise, but everything, altitude-wise, he was fine, all of the checks and scores and everything. And he just happened to mention to his friend who was a guide with the other team, oh, I'm just feeling a bit under the weather. So then the other team got involved. I'm like, right, back off, please. It would have been nice if you had come and asked. But I've got this covered, and if I need support, I know where to come. And I think that is, from other teams' perspectives, that's really important. Because I have, when we've been working with Discover Adventure, and other teams have found out we have doctors on the trips. I don't know if it happened on ours, but I know it's happened on other trips where clients have come to us and said, we need some help. And the doctor can only do so much, but we're not going to say if someone needs a lot of medical attention, actually, no, So it's understanding how to work with each other without just, like you said, wading in and going, I've got this, I can fix it. It's sort of looking at the bigger picture. Yeah. So
yeah, that awareness of what's going on around you. And so Jo, I've if anyone wants to hear more about how you can be a good or bad medic on an expedition, and Jo's work, you've worked with hundreds of medics over your time. You've got some real insight into what good medicine on expedition looks like. Come to her session at this year's conference. I think it's going to be really good. Now, I've collected together 4 of my favorite Jo Bradshaw quotes. I'm going to throw them at you, and I want you to tell me what each of these means and what its significance has in your life. So the first one is, choose your mood.
Yes. Yeah. So I came up with that when I started guiding, because you can feel, especially I do a lot about at altitude, and when to begin with, when you're guiding and you don't get much sleep, and you can wake up in the morning and you're quite grumpy, but you can do nothing about the sleep you haven't had until that night, So I could either choose that day to be really grumpy because I haven't had enough sleep, or I can choose to accept that that's happened, and I can then choose to go, right, how do I deal with it? I can either be really grumpy and really annoying, or actually just get on with it. Just suck it up and get on with it, and I know I'll get some sleep. And I really think about that when I'm replying to somebody as well who is being maybe a little bit aggressive towards me from a state of anxiety. So what we were saying earlier is, I can either go into that sort of child mode, or I can take a step back and, not react with that 2-second part of your brain that just wants to click in. So I think it has quite a wide ranging meaning for me. It's when you start practicing it, it's like anything, practicing good or bad habits, they become, good or bad things, they can become a habit. And just putting that, it's like a little sort of switch in my head, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting how on these trips, how people start snapping at each other, and tensions start to kind of ramp up. And I think for me, what that comment means is, it's all about the power that exists in the gap between stimulus and response, between something that agitates you and arouses some kind of emotion in you, and then how you then react to that. And I think the more you can say, okay, this situation shit, I'm at altitude, I feel like shit, which is like most of the time. But I actually have the power to say how I respond to that, and how that informs my behavior. And it's really quite amazing when you realize that, isn't it? When you kind of like, okay, it's okay, I feel like shit, but I'm just going to kind of hold that, and I'm not going to tell the rest of the world about that all the time, and really have a go at everyone because I'm not really in a good place.
100%. And also being honest about it. If you're not in a good place and you don't want anyone near you, which is harder for a leader and a doc, but as a client, or as a on a personal expedition, just say to people, right, I just need half an hour a day, whatever, just I need that space. And I think that goes back to the humility and vulnerability. Is people see you're human, they bond to you much better. Yes, show strength 100%, especially in what we do, is people want leadership. You're there for a reason, but showing that you're human is really important as well. And sucking it up. I've chosen this job, or I've chosen to climb Everest. I've chosen to put myself in this position. So I just need to get on with it. Yeah. What happens inside is a different thing.
Let's move on to quote number 2.
Yes.
Quote number 2, Joe, is think it, don't say it.
Yes, absolutely. So I heard this from Rolf Ustra, who's a very good friend of mine and head guide, owns 360 Expeditions. I've done a huge amount of climbing with him over the years, and some people love stories, and some you choose the words that come out of your mouth, and sometimes it's best to not let them come out. So when or even so on expeditions, I have this little thing where I say to clients in the initial briefing, if you've had a bad night through bodily function expulsions please don't sit at breakfast telling everybody, because you're then going to put everybody else off their breakfast, and I really want everyone else to eat some breakfast. So we have this sort of saying in the briefings, it's almost the 2-second rule, is does this really need to come out of my mouth, the words, not anything else, at that particular time, or can I save it for later, or can I save it for private? I think sometimes you listen to what people are saying, the stories that they're coming out with, and just because they want to fill a void or fill a silence, and it's like sometimes silence is golden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I know exactly what you mean there, Joe. I certainly, some of my earlier trips, I found when I really got on with the clients, I found that I relaxed a little bit more. And you find that some of the humor, when humor is an essential part of morale in these trips, but it can sometimes start to kind of degrade a little bit, and you can, I think you can find where the boundaries are quite quickly, and especially they're so intense, aren't they? You're all kind of thrown in together, it's complete strangers at the airport, and within a couple of days, it feels like you've known each other for 5 years, and you're just bantering away. And you can easily start saying stuff that you actually really shouldn't. And I think having that self-control and self-awareness to just be, okay, hang on a sec, I need to just kind of, I need to rein this in now.
Add to the conversation, or yeah, because once you've said something, it can't be unsaid. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, absolutely, totally. Yeah. So yeah, that's very good. And okay, how about this one? The world is like a book. Those that do not travel read only the front page.
Yes, I read that quote years ago when I started. I say years ago. It was 10 years ago when I started as a freelancer, and I wasn't particularly well travelled before sort of the mid 2000s, because I'd been to New Zealand in, God, when was it now? 1990. When I worked with horses, I spent 6 months on the horsey circuit out there. But that's basically all I'd done. And so you just see such a limited view of the world. You can see it. Social media wasn't there then, but you can see it on the news. But if you don't get to see it yourself, you don't get to really delve into what the book is all about. And I think, getting out there and having the confidence to go and explore, even just in your local area, we can't explore anywhere at the moment, but there's so many places. When I've been driving around in my Tesco delivery van, I've been going to places I didn't even know existed around here, and I've lived in this area for 12 years now. So, it's like, open the book, go and see what's inside, because you might actually like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure many of our listeners who've traveled will sing the will be able to talk about their benefits to them of traveling, and how it really opens your mind, and how important that is.
Oh, massively. Yeah, 100%. And I feel, when we go and do expeditions, and like in Nepal, so when we went and did Everest Base Camp, we flew from Kathmandu to Lukla, and then we flew back at the end of it, and you just see bits of Kathmandu from the route that takes you to the hotel. And then I know you went exploring a lot, but a lot of people don't. They stay in Tamil, and it's all very safe and very touristy. They don't really get out. Whereas these days you have to drive 5 hours out of Kathmandu to another airport. Well, I say an airport, it's a runway and a building, and you fly to Lukla and back from there. So you get to see Nepal actually happening. And the first group of clients that did that with me said, oh, it's amazing, because we actually feel like we saw a side of Nepal we never would have done. You know, the plastic issues they have, or the way they live, and where all the sort of shacks and shops are, and the vehicles, and the craziness of it all. They would never have got to see that. And as much as I hate that interesting ride, it's so important. I think it's so important.
Yeah, especially with some of these commercial trips that are sold, the itineraries are quite tight. There may be 7-8 day trips, quite long haul travel. People are bussed from the airport to the hotel, and then they take into the mountain, do the climb, come back, and they really get any experience of that country. But for me, when I've traveled, some of the most powerful experiences I've had have been where there's been a free day, and I've been able to do little micro adventures. You know, just go on a little hike to a nearby mountain, or just wander around the city and see stuff. And it's just some of those kind of slightly unplanned but organic experiences that you can have along the side of what is supposed to be the main event that can sometimes be the most rewarding.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and really empowering to people as well. You know, travel has changed me so much. You know, I am quite a few years ago, I stopped buying new stuff unless I absolutely have to. So I buy secondhand clothes now from Oxfam online. I buy secondhand furniture because why not? You know, I rarely buy anything new because stuff is already made. So why not reuse it where I can? You know, where I can. I'm so much more aware about environmental issues and about plastic problem and all of this sort of stuff. And as much as I travel on aircraft, which is bad, you know, it's putting other things right in your life and not continuing with the behaviors you've done so much. Society as a rule is about getting the newest and the best and the biggest and the most expensive and the XYZ, and you know, it's so wrong. It's so wrong. It's just, and I think what we're going through now may hopefully change some of that. I don't know.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I certainly really feel it. Like you, for me, travel's been a huge part of my life, and it's very strange not being able to. I've also got a 10-month-old at home. That's been a bit of an issue with regards to being able to travel. But certainly, a global pandemic is certainly going to ground you, and it's really made me reflect on how amazing it is and how lucky we are to be able to see so much of the world that we have done. What privilege that is, and increasingly, especially with climate change, it's been tainted with guilt going to these places and burning all that jet fuel. And like you, I've made changes in other areas of my life so that hopefully I can use all my carbon credits on air miles, on flights. So I've pretty much gone vegan. I'm buying everything secondhand. I'm cycling everywhere. I'm doing everything I can in every other area of my life, just so that I can get on the odd flight. And I know that's not enough. I know that I'm still, unfortunately, killing the planet by doing that, and I don't quite know how to reconcile that completely in my head yet. But
I know it's weird because I always wondered, you know, when I get on a flight, I wondered how the world would benefit environmentally from like 24 hours of nobody traveling anywhere. Well, we're seeing that now. You know, there's, I think, commercial flights are all but stopped. There's obviously cargo going around the places, but you know, seeing things like the canals in Venice are clear water now, and there's dolphins in them, apparently, according to the news, you know, and it's nature can get back so quickly, and it will be interesting to see how this changes, whether people go back to how they were or whether people will travel less anyway because they don't want to be surrounded by so many people. I don't know. It would be, and how the environment benefits, you know, it has to somehow.
Yeah.
It must do,
after this pandemic, the only thing that will have changed is everything.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, final quote: Joe,
Yeah.
these are your words, not mine. Don't be a
Yes.
dick.
Yes. But you were very much in agreement. So I've kind of been having thoughts, it's very much it's like, oh, come on, just don't be an idiot. And I was going to do some volunteering for Team Rubicon. And in 2017, I went to their training weekend, and it back then, only 3 years ago, it was very military-led organisation, and it's changed a bit now. But and their mantra was, "Don't be a dick." So don't put yourself in situations where you're endangering not only yourself but others. Don't make the situation worse, and all of this. And for me, it's when I'm guiding, rather than saying outwardly to a client, "Don't be a dick," which is a bit rude, I weave the saying into things that I've done in the past, where I've been a bit of an idiot, and everybody gets what I'm saying, and then they start using it on themselves. And I've heard it, somebody in a tent who's maybe a bit late and for breakfast and hasn't got up on time or what have you, and they're like, "Oh, don't be a dick, such and such," and it's like, oh, okay. And I think it's a really important sort of a little bit of a stopper for us to remind ourselves that, everybody can be a bit of an idiot, and that it's just trying to limit those numbers. And nobody's perfect, and you need to be able to make mistakes in your life in order to learn. But it's then what you do with the mistakes that, makes a difference. So, yeah.
And it's interesting. It taps into this idea. I think we all know when we're being a dick. Maybe not necessarily at the time, but if we reflect on the day's events, we can usually sit back and say, "Yeah, I was a dick to that guy. I didn't really handle that very well."
Yeah,
and it's just all about self-awareness and how important that is, especially on trips when you're at altitude, you're in a confined group, and you're under extreme stress. You've just got to be very, very aware of every action that you have and the impact that has on the team.
Yeah, definitely. It's always, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And you can say stuff and not reacting to stuff. And actually, I've apologized to clients when maybe I've said the right thing but in the wrong tone, or it's had the right intention but it's just come out a little bit incorrectly. And I think that builds up trust even more. And I've had clients come and apologize to me, when they've really not been that pleasant. And I heard another leader say this: if somebody's being very unpleasant to you, is that nobody deserves to be spoken to like that, because it really puts onus back on the person who is being very unpleasant, as well as it's not my fault but it is my problem. Is sort of gaining ownership of what's going on, that they know that you haven't created the situation but you are going to try and put it right. And I think, again, it goes back to the humility and vulnerability. It's knowing when you're either in the wrong or something needs to be put right, and it's how you do it. So yeah, we're all human at the end of the day. We're all
totally.
So,
and actually, do you think maybe sometimes it's actually okay to be a dick? Because we all do it. We are only human. When our chimp brains are activated, we do things that we shouldn't have done. But then the thing that matters is recognizing that and then rectifying it, and actually going back to that person and fessing up and saying, my behavior was unacceptable, or I could have handled this differently. Can we start again? And when I've been able to do that, and not as much as I'd like to have done, if I'm honest, when I've had enough humility to do that, it's never gone badly for me. I really think that's something we should all be doing more of.
Yeah, 100%. It's just, yeah. I can't say anything more to that because you've said it all. But yeah, it's very much so.
Yeah. Okay, Joe. So let's move back to the kind of time we're in. And a key aspect of this pandemic for medics on the front line is facing the unknown, suddenly having to adapt and overcome. And are there any particular insights or lessons from mountaineering that you could offer to healthcare workers on the front line as they're confronting this? Any kind of transferable lessons that you think would help them?
I think just realizing that you're not in this alone, and asking for help. There's even the best mountaineers in the world, when they go and do things solo, they're not actually on their own. There's a backup, there's a team backing them up from somewhere, or there's somebody on the end of the phone. And I think, if you're out seeing patients house to house and you're putting yourself in difficult situations that way, or whether you're working in hospital in the ICU, is relying on others and being honest. I think it's so important. When we were saying earlier, is about being honest, and it's going to have a massive impact mentally on so many frontline staff, and it will take time to filter out. And I know that from being in the earthquake and how long it actually took for the sort of the grief response and the growth, post-traumatic growth. So rather than being in post-traumatic stress, you go into post-traumatic growth. And I think it takes a long time for that to happen. And it's being honest with yourself as well as other people. I'm in awe of, because like you, I have a huge amount of friends who are medics and on the front line and doing the most unbelievable work always, but more so at the moment. And for us, it's checking in with them and making sure they're okay. So yeah, keep going, because this will finish at some point. But a bit of self-care is really important as well. Nobody's infallible, as we've seen.
Thanks, Jo.
Yeah.
One thing that I've certainly learned from our conversation is you went from 2015 being at Camp 1 during the biggest earthquake that Nepal has seen, and the whole Khumbu icefall being completely remolded, and 19 people dead on base camp. It must have seemed so unfeasible at that point that you could ever summit Everest. That was your kind of dream, and yet you dusted your phone off from under the snow, and suddenly your sponsor gave you another lifeline, and a year later there you were standing on the summit. And for me, what that shows is how things can change, and how things appear right now is not how they'll be in 6, 12, 18 months time. And I think we have to keep that in our mind with this pandemic, because this is just a period in time. And one thing that's keeping me positive during this is that that notion that this is just what's happening right now, and things will be different again in the future, and that though the possibilities are going to open up again for us, and we've just got to ride through this period, make the best of it that we can, and we just know that things are not going to be like this forever.
Yeah, thankfully. And it gives us, resilience is a huge thing in life anyway, and you don't gain resilience until you go through the tougher stuff. And as horrendous as this is, it is building a massive resilience in all of us, and everybody's dealing with it in their own way. And probably it's bringing out things in people they never knew they had, or they're much stronger than they thought they were ever going to be, or much more adaptable or flexible, or what have you. And, and I'm delivering groceries for Tesco, and we're being clapped as we drive through villages, and we're being thanked on every single call, which is, virtually unheard of. And all we are doing is putting groceries on people's doorsteps. We're not allowed to go into the houses as the delivery drivers used to, but everybody is playing a very small part in a very big picture. Some have bigger roles than others with the NHS, but a friend of mine who said the other day that he was really struggling with not having a purpose in life at the moment. You know, he's an adventurer, and all his work has been cancelled for the time being. And I said, your purpose is to stay at home. That's your purpose, and that's what you need to hang on to. And I think it's really breaking it down to the sort of, it's the next footstep that counts. I think we can't look too far into the future. It's what is right in front of us at the moment. You know, they were talking on the news about exit strategies and everything, and it's like, God, can't we just concentrate on what is happening here and now? Because we don't know when the exit is going to be, you know, and I think that's really important. So it's the next
Absolutely,
step
we have
that
to make
counts.
the best of where we are right now. And I just think that's amazingly adaptable for you, Jo, that your first bit of adaptation in life was moving from the kind of business world into the outdoor mountaineering world, and now you're moving from outdoor mountaineering into delivery driving. You know, you've turned on a dime. You've
Yeah.
you've adapted and overcome in whatever way you can. And I know it's not perfect, and you know it's maybe not what you would choose to be doing right now, but you're doing it with good grace, and you're recognizing the value that has right now.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, everything that I've done in my past, or certain sections of it. So I used to be in retail. I managed an early learning centre many years ago, and was in a department store before. All that customer service stuff, which is what we do on a daily basis when we're guiding anyway, it just comes back, and it's having that history that's helped. The driving, you know, I got my HGV license when I was 19 in New Zealand for, you know, very crazy reason, but I never knew then that actually that HGV license, even though it didn't transfer to the UK, I could drive the 7.5-ton trucks with Discover Adventure and all the vans. And now that I'm driving not a very big van, but it's big enough for Tesco in teeny tiny lanes and everything, it all has a purpose, you know, at some point along the line. So, you know, yeah.
And life's
And
great plan that it has for us
it
all.
is, isn't it? Yeah, knowing when to not say stuff to clients if they're, or customers now, you know, if they're sort of having a go at you because they can't get delivery slots. It's not being that child.
Yeah.
It's like, take a step back. 2-second rule is so important. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
Jo, if people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
So I have a website, which is jobradshaw.co.uk, and there's links through to my Facebook page and Instagram on there. I'm not on Twitter anymore, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. So and I never thought I would say this, but you can Google my name and I come up. Who knew? But yeah, my website it's being remodeled at the moment by a very good friend. So it's going to look even sparklier than it is, has done in the past. So yeah, just you know, follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you fancy, and yeah, keep up my blogs. I blog quite a lot, and they sort of, you know, it's sort of very interesting to see where the blogs are taking me at the moment. It's not all about the mountains, so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I found your blogs really interesting, Jane. It's you're very candid. You really reflect on, you know, what that experience, what that adventure for you, how that shapes you as a person, and what it means for you with your sort of charity work and some of your background and some of the things that you've dealt with over your life. And they're really powerful. So yeah, definitely check them out. Yeah, well, Jo, we wish you the best from when. We look forward to seeing you at the conference. We hope that you're not thwarted again with Carten's Pyramid by this pandemic, and that you get up there and complete the 7 summits.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, if things pan out this year, by the time we get to the conference, then hopefully I will have been stood on the 7th of the 7. But who knows?
It's in the hands of the gods.
It will happen at some point.
Yeah. Well, great chatting to you, Jo. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Will.